Rhode Island Avenue.
That was on our.
Where the old road,
Probably could have done more to help.
Washington County. It's like
West Main Road.
Okay. That's where, okay, that's where.
It's strange.
Heavy guns. Oh, okay.
Unfortunate owner.
They made my.
He said he was,
The chief is not able to make it today. The chief Rains, he,
your agenda? Is this it?
Reserved for like, okay,
Okay.
crazy.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 7 PM. Please rise for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call to order this meeting of the Town Council. The first item of business is announcements. I have none. Does any counselor have an announcement?
I do. And I was gonna prepare myself for it, and I just thought of it now, and I apologize. Fourth grade teacher that worked at Wilbur McMahon for 30 years, Mrs. Manchester, my fourth grade teacher, passed away. Can't remember her first name right now. but she was a wonderful-
Ruth Manchester.
Ruth Manchester, did you have her?
Yeah, I had it also,
You
yeah.
can help me out. Wonderful teacher, a wonderful
She
human
was.
being. It taught me penmanship, and we used to get stars if we wrote correctly. Just a wonderful, wonderful woman. I think she's 92 or 93. Taught many people, as you can see. I'm young, he's a little older. Many people in this community. So she passed away, and she was a wonderful person.
Could we observe a moment of silence as we remember Mrs. Manchester? Thank you, Counselor, for that start. The next item is approval of the minutes of August 10th.
Motion to approve August 10th, 2023 minutes unless anybody has any comments or questions.
I'll second it.
Discussion on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next item is department head reports. First, that of the building and zoning department.
Motion to place building and zoning department report on file, unless someone wants to
Second.
talk to us.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the next is the finance director's report. I would call your attention to the fact that we continue or he continues and his department continues in its ability to retrieve delinquent taxes. This July sum is almost $84,000 of delinquent taxes. And so we're continuing to make significant progress in that regard. Is there a motion to place that?
Motion to place on file.
Second.
Discussion on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next item is an item of old business. And I've entitled it, Consider and Approve a Strategy and a Timetable to Reduce the Impact of Crop Cannons on Ambient Noise Levels in Town. Now, the minutes that you just approved called for us to create a cease and desist order, which we in fact did do with the solicitor's assistance, and put that out. What I'd like to give you is a sense of where we stand today. We have convened a group which includes Mr. Mayor, who's in the audience with us, Councilor Mataronis, and myself. And let me just point out in that discussion that Councilor McHugh also wished to serve in that capacity. And I see the opportunity in the future for that to, as I'll describe shortly, for there to be other pairs of counselors who might be part of any moving forward. What was to be done is to draft a cease and desist and first warning and place this matter on the next council agenda, which we're doing, which will start the enforcement proceedings and send this first warning to the property owner and farmer, as well as concurrently develop a group that consists of 2 counselors for the moment, Mataronis and Mushin, a representative from RIDEM. I've involved Ken Ayers. He was not able to attend this particular meeting. The administrator who was there, a farmer who was not there, and an offended party, and Mr. Mayor filled that role. That group met as required and formed an opinion at the moment. I'll tell you that today I was called by Ian Walker, who was identified as the most, whose corn fields were the closest proximity to the issues that had developed with loud noises of a continuous nature and a frequent nature that Ms. Almy brought forward 2 meetings ago. It was because of that that we issued this cease and desist. He informed me this afternoon that the perception that I had had from a report from residents in the immediate surroundings and from the police department, that the number and frequency of cannon discharges had decreased significantly over the past week. He acknowledged that that was the case. He anticipated that that would continue to decrease. And I asked him, because I was made aware of this by somebody smarter than I about what birds enjoy, the fact that the chokecherry blossoming had completed and the chokecherries were available and the birds were moving from the corn to the chokecherries. All of that to say that I believe that the issue that we've had in the past with this is we've declared, great, we're done with that for the year, we're all set. And in fact, I don't believe that's how we should approach it this time, especially in light of the fact that there are citizens who have brought to our attention that. So I have consulted with the solicitor. I'll certainly give him the opportunity to speak about this. He and I would say, differ in our approach. And I'm going to suggest that the council consider a strategy that that would have us invite, and that invitation can certainly be October, November, invite URI with their expertise to come and talk to us about what has worked statewide and nationwide in bird control, many of which Ian Walker would acknowledge that he has attempted and tried and been unsuccessful with. I say we acknowledge that, set that aside for the moment, and say, so what's the science about this? What can you tell us about how we can control birds in cornfields for what amounts to a relatively short span, and I'm sure it's not short for those who are sitting listening to boom, boom, boom every day, but a relatively short span of the growing season. And what could we do to make that even shorter or change it? I won't go into all the details of mine and Ian's conversation. I believe we have a farmer who is willing to hear what might be done differently. And I would suggest that what we put together is an effort to invite URI, DEM, and any other entities with information on this fact to come to the council and speak to us about what we might do differently or what we might encourage our farmers to do differently so as to be able to have a different year in 2024.
Peace and quiet. I did speak to Rebecca Brown, who is the head of agricultural department at URI, and she said she was more than willing to come down, so I'll touch base with her again and let her know that we are going to try to get together, have a meeting with some of the farmers and see if we can get a resolve to this situation. So.
Now, thanks. I'd like to give the solicitor an opportunity, since what we did was follow his guidance and advice, and we, I think, voted for that unanimously, to issue a cease and desist order, and what stepping away or not proceeding with this cease and desist order might mean.
Well, you've outlined a strategy to deal with the issue. If you didn't pursue that strategy and you looked at section 3-1.4 of the town code, to me, your next step would be to have the police conduct an investigation and go, get the necessary evidence, because enforcement of this matter would be in Rhode Island District Court, Second Division District Court in Newport. We already know what the defense is, because Mr. Walker has sent in a letter and said the defense is the Right to Farm Act. So, the outcome in court would be in question. That's a good defense. We try and overcome it. But there's always a risk when you go to court, and there's an expense. So, to me, this effort that you have is probably going to be the most cost-effective and best approach for the town at this time.
Okay. Okay. Council, any questions or?
No, I make a motion that you and I continue working with the Ag Trust, our administrator, the solicitor, and Mr. Mayor, and some other farmers through this off-season, see if, and also with Rebecca Brown from URI, I think she's going to be the most helpful, and see if we can start the growing season next year with little to no noise. So that would be my motion.
If I could,
Yes, please go ahead.
my thoughts, I'm glad that Ian Walker has sent us something about what he's doing, and I'm glad he's tried other alternatives. I'm glad to see that he wants to work like that. I think it is a good idea and a good strategy to get an expert. If URI is an expert, I like experts, I'm not one, on how to keep birds away from corn. But I would like, in a perfect world, which I know I don't live in, if Ian Walker could say, here's my parcel of land, and here's where I have corn, and here's what I do from when I started in July to September, and this is how I move my cannons around, and this is why I have to move my cannons around, and kind of show us what he's doing. Because if I live there, at least I could have that and say, okay, I live here, the cannons are going to be moved like this because only 10 days out of the growing season, the corn has sugar in it. I don't know, something tangible from the farmer that could say, listen, this is how I farm my land. I know you don't know because I'm not a farmer, so I'm going to show you. I know you're a neighbor, and I want to be accountable for what I do, and I want to be a good neighbor. Here's what's going to happen, and here's a timeline for it. So I think, I can't request him to do that, but
I agree with you, and I'll tell you that in our brief conversation of 30 minutes duration, he went through that with me, describing, for example, the degree to which crop cannons have changed, such that when Ms. Almy brought this forward 3 years ago,
2015, right.
it seemed like only yesterday. It was 8 years ago. Thank you.
Or an eternity.
When it was brought forward the first time, crop cannons were kind of unidirectional. You put them in the field and someone could come along and point them another direction, and they would then discharge in that direction. They now are digitally controlled such that they move or are able to move. Now, of course, that depends upon what the settings might be. But there is an increase in capability, and I would agree with you that we need to be educated on that, which is the reason that I think this is going to be an important effort.
So, Ms. Almy, if I could ask you, when you sent your complaint in, and I went to your house, I don't know how long ago that was, 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, I don't remember. And I listened for an hour, and I commented that I thought the noise was unacceptable. I mean, I was asked to go listen for noise. I listened for noise. I found it unacceptable. That's my expertise. Okay. Has it changed any?
Well, since then, it moved, I'm horrible with distance, but it stayed on that north side for a couple weeks. Then that field, it goes closer to Old Main, and then on the other side of the driveway. But then it jumped over West Main to the other side, which is now affecting that group.
Compton Cliffs.
But I can still hear it. I mean, and of course, the wind impacts that too, which even, if it was back over, across, on the other side of my wall, Bertrand Avenue will get a good impact from it,
Those.
depending on the wind direction.
Okay.
But, yes, it's less, of course, this past week, it's been
It was
really
very quiet
Quiet.
Friday, Saturday and Sunday,
Yeah.
it was
all day.
guns a-blazing.
But there were, yeah, exactly. And then, look, like 2 weeks ago, I swear there were like two going, and there wasn't a second that the cannon wasn't going off.
You know,
Like there was no break.
you
And
know,
that actually will start to happen, more, like that will happen a lot.
I just think if I lived next to it, at least I'd like to see, you know, what the strategy is for the farmer and what he has to do and why it's like
Yeah.
that.
I mean, I want to raise my hand and just, here we go again. And I find, the URI is going to bring to the table, their laser machine. DEM is pro-farmer. What I see, what I've read, and I'm going to make copies of it, of everything that I have researched since 2015. It's even comes from the cannon manufacturers. They do not work well alone, and they are not bulletproof. The birds are still going to get to the corn even with the cannons going. So hence, any other thing that's manufactured, if a farmer's saying, I've tried other things, they don't work. Well, how many ears of corn did you lose when you used the other
Techniques.
things? And then how many years of corn did you lose when you with crop cannons? You're still gonna, no matter what you use, you're still going to lose years of corn. Having said that, they are not to be used alone, anything. And even with instructions from the crop cannon people, you have to move, and when they say move them, it isn't because now the next grid of corn is going to sprout. It's just you have to move them, like every 2 days. His shots are way too often, and you have to use scarecrows, mylar balls, mylar streams. Everything else has to be going on with the cannons. So having said that, there are a lot of things not happening with these cannons. And I will definitely print out all that information.
Great.
Just a quote from his letter. He said, other methods of bird control we have tried, some of which we still use, include balloons, repellent spray, screeches, and lasers. And I know he's using those in conjunction with the cannons, so I think that's part of his.
I didn't see one ball up.
Yeah, nor have I. And I think,
Not
just to answer your question, if it's going off near her house, I hear it at my house on Sea Spray
Yeah.
Way. They hear, I've talked to a young couple that lives in Tiverton, on the border. Oh, they said, what is that ungodly noise? And I said, that's a crop can. And they said, what in God's name is a crop? And I explained it to them. So I think your question was deemed around, if it's on the west side or the east side, you hear it all over. In that area of.
Well, that to me is, going to Kate's point, that's to me what this whole URI thing is about. Maybe he's got to figure his conjunctions out better. Maybe he can minimize the crop can and stuff like that, but I live on a farm, but I don't consider myself a farmer, not an agricultural farmer. Gary's a fisherman, sub-captain. I'm not even sure what Andrew does, but I know he works for somebody in Providence. But anyway, that's why we're trying to get the technical police, which we're all aggravated with the noise. My point here is, I don't want the focus to be, let's stop him. But nobody's stepping up to help him. Everybody's talking about stopping making the noise, but nobody's stepping up to say, okay, we've done all this research, let's help the guy out. And I don't mean monetarily, I just mean, he's a local farmer and he's doing the best he can. And he's got dirt under his fingernails and dirt in his face, and he's trying to make a living. I've heard some very less than stellar comments during all this. And I'm not defending the noise here, I just want to get that clear. I've heard about, well, he's getting $1 an ear and there's thousands of ears, so he's making thousands of dollars. That it totally ignores the fact of how much it took to get it in the ground and get it back out again. So some of those misconceptions and less than eloquent comments, I wish would stop and say, look, the noise is there. We're all agreeing the noise is a pain in the butt. We wish it would stop. What can we do to minimize this dilemma we're in? And I think by the research with the URI and all the others help, we might be able to come to a solution. Doesn't mean the cannons are gonna stop, but it might mean they get minimized greatly.
And I respect that, and there's nothing more I would like than if Walker's made $1 million a day on corn, because I'm a capitalist, and I think that's exactly what they should do. But it just, I just want to make sure we understand, and we had a meeting Monday that no one showed up to. So, and we thankfully gotten a letter, and I would ask too, I believe that land is owned by the Ag Trust, is that correct?
That is correct.
So it's leased to one person and then sublet to another. So hopefully the Ag Trust can be involved in the meeting as well, since it is their property.
They will.
I agree with you. I hope Walker's makes $1 million a day on corn, just quietly.
Carol, did I say the Ag Trust? I did, didn't I?
If I could ask that you put a time that, at a meeting in October, let's give ourselves, depending upon what we get for answers, but in either the first, a council meeting in October, we will return with a report of what the specific invitees and date for the meeting will be.
Carol, what's the first meeting in October?
Fifth, I think it's the 5th.
Can't be the 5th,
Yeah.
because that's not the first Thursday after the first Monday.
October.
It is.
No, it is. It's the 5th.
Oh, Monday's the 1st?
I'm not a genius, I just saw it on my phone.
Never doubt an electrician.
So let's come back on the second week of second meeting of October. That way we can get all the participants. I think,
Okay.
Probably be less
Scheduled
in
for
the
the second
field.
meeting of October,
for some kind of who's going to be involved with this and what our plan is going forward.
that's then your motion.
Yeah, plus the motion I had on before about the work sessions. I had a motion on the floor.
Yeah, but it was never seconded.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you repeat your first motion? and we'll
Yeah,
get that
okay.
second? Or I'll ask the clerk.
Carol, can you repeat it, please?
Yes, sir, I'll be right with you. I just want to get this.
Okay, that Gary and Bob work with the Agricultural Conservancy Trust, the solicitor and the administrator, and Mr. Meyer and farmers, and Rebecca Brown from URI in an effort to work toward a better season for next year. And then you added that you wanted to have a meeting October 19th at the council meeting. Is that for a report of what?
Or, yeah, some kind of,
So can that be a
Yeah.
single motion?
yeah.
Second.
The motion is made by Councilor Mataronis, seconded by Councilor Iriarte Moore. Any discussion on that?
I think Mr. Jennings wants to speak.
Yes, sir.
I live at 109 West Main Road, and Ian Walker plants 3.5 acres that I own. And I don't have a problem with the cannons. Yes, they're there. My wife and I, years and years ago, and I was born here, 44, and I moved up to where we live now. It was a turkey farm. That's what it was. The Almies had a turkey farm back in the 30s and the 40s. This is an agricultural town. This town has always been this way, and, people have earned, a living from it. And I respect that. Yes, the cannons, I suppose, there could be a day when, maybe I've heard enough too. But you know what? It's not a problem. It just isn't a problem. And I mean, like in town, you have the winery, and people complain about, wouldn't that be nice if the winery could do what they like to do and have, weddings and different types of functions. The noise doesn't bother us, and we live, 3 minutes away. It was very disappointing for me to listen to people complaining. It really is. And that's, I have nothing else to say.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
No.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a couple of questions. I've
Sure.
written 2 letters to you, Alice Benedict, 31 Old Main Road. First off, we've been here 30-something years, and cannons were not used, at least for the first 15 of them. We never heard a cannon, and there was lots of wonderful, wonderful corn that we would buy, but there was no cannon noise. So maybe something's changed with the birds. I wouldn't know that. But my question is, in your studying and talking with URI people, will you also talk with other farmers in town who don't use cannons but raise corn and see what percentage they lose and why they don't use a cannon? And because it's true, we want the corn, we want the farmer to succeed, but it has just been horrible this summer. My next question is, if there's more cannon noise this summer, the weekend was terrible. It was the most glorious weekend weather-wise of the summer, and it was blasting from 7 on Saturday onward, 7:30 on Sunday onward. If the cannons start again this year, whom do I call? Do I call the police to get a decibel reading? I mean, we're kind of sleep-deprived, crazed, we can't have company. It's been awful.
The answer to your specific question is yes, that's correct. If you have a noise complaint, the police is the immediate person to call so that decibel levels can be taken. I will acknowledge that the decibel levels that we established in the noise ordinance were intended to reflect noise or sound from the reproduction of human voices. And so I'm not certain, and this is among the things that I think we want to be sure we understand in this review, I'm not certain that the same decibel level would apply to an explosive charge. But we'll deal with that. If you believe, just as you've described, that your quality of life is being interrupted by noise that is not appropriate, I would ask that you call the police at that moment so that we can get readings at that moment rather than have it be a week later that we try to reconstruct.
Didn't want to make nuisance calls. It seems kind of crazy to have to call the police for that since we know it's happening. So, but that's what you still want me to do.
I'm saying that that's what you have as a citizen of the town available to you at this point. I hope that we'll be able to narrow that and specify that with respect to the problem that we have right now. The noise ordinance that we have assumes that noise is generated from human voices. So nonetheless, we have the ability to measure it, which I think will be valuable.
Okay, and the committee, you and you guys on the committee, if we find any data on, study data on cannons and crops, do you want us to email you?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I have to,
Case collected, and I found a URI study, which might have been done by Rebecca Brown using lasers versus nothing. Of course, you can't use a cannon in nothing because of sound, but.
when I talked to her, she said she was well aware of the farmers in town, and she's helped them.
Study here.
Yeah, right. So, and I talked to a couple of farmers in Tiverton that don't use cannons, and there's one in town that doesn't use cannons. So we'll invite those people to see if we can come up with a solution.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to ruin anybody's
No.
livelihood, but on the other hand, we're getting pretty crazed.
Well, the difference here, although it does affect your sense of frustration at the moment, the difference would be if we can work on this in October and November when there isn't any corn and talk about what we're going to do when there is corn. I think that's a better solution than to wait until people are
Absolutely.
beside themselves with aggravation. All right, the motion is made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item of business is new business, is a request from the fire chief who's with us to award a bid for painting of the apparatus bay.
Motion to approve.
I'll second it, but I got a question for the chief. I meant to call him today. I didn't get around to it. On Lopco, which is the one that you, where we go with, they are the cheapest by a couple $1,000s. It doesn't give, I mean, it gives an idea of what they're gonna be doing, but on the Bruno painting, the interior painting scope of work is scrape any loose or peeling paint, fill any nail holes, caulk any open seams as needed, sand entire surface of areas to be painted, spot prime is needed, apply 2 coats of finished paint, sanding between coats to the following, which is the garage. Is that,
That's the industry standard, so Lopco's gonna be doing the same.
Lopco's gonna be doing, they're gonna sand in between coats, so they're going, so we're comparing apples to apples here, okay. That's the only question I
Any
have.
further discussion?
So chief, these painters make a lot of money.
Pardon?
Painters are expensive.
It's crazy expensive.
Oh,
Going back into business.
I can get, that's the best I can do.
You didn't bid on it?
Thank you, Counselor. I'll take that as, yeah. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item of business is a request from Corporal Caitlin Farrar, who's with us this evening, and firefighter Jason De Silva to hold the annual trunk or treat event on Veterans Field on October 25th.
I think the council should wholeheartedly support this, and I'll move that we approve it.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. It's nice to have you both with us. Take care. Next item of business is recommendation from the fire chief to remove probationary firefighter Randall Medina from probationary status, appoint him a firefighter 3rd class.
Motion to approve.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item of business is to consider for approval an addendum to the Learn 365 RI Compact. This addendum is entitled the Rhode Island Community Learning Center Compact.
I don't know what.
Administrator, would you like to comment any on this?
Yes, I can comment on, I was just looking for mine, that's
Okay.
is the one that I had.
Just while he's looking for that, we have agreed in a past meeting to participate in the Learn 365 RI Compact. The governor and his office have issued an addendum to that, which is entitled the Rhode Island Community Learning Center Compact, which basically puts, if I can say it this way, arms and legs on the ability to provide 365-day-a-year services to children, to school children.
Correct. And if you recall, I can't recall how many meetings ago, we did sign an agreement to receive a grant of $50,000, which will support that.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Discussion on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And then to consider for approval a grant agreement forwarded by the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank to address stormwater issues on Taylor's Lane.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion on it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next is a request and communications from Gene and Stu Douglas to use Veterans Field on October 14th for valet and bus parking for their son's wedding guests. The wedding is going to be held on Long Highway.
Motion to approve with all the stipulations for the insurance and everything they need to legally
To
do
use
it,
our
to use our
property.
field.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks. Copy of a notice of public hearing received from the Rhode Island Statewide Planning Council concerning proposed amendments to the rules and standards. This is their book, their Bible that they go by. of the Rhode Island Statewide Planning Council. That hearing occurs on the 18th of September. This is that notice.
Motion to place on file.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor? Aye. A letter from Martina Halsey asking the council to request the solicitor file a friend of the court brief for the town if a petition before the Rhode Island Supreme Court is granted to South Coast Wind. I'll ask the solicitor to comment on that. Let me just say, to begin with, we have hired Marissa Desatel to represent us in this area, and I would think it appropriate, and I'll ask the solicitor's advice on that, that we consider assigning that task to her rather than the solicitor himself.
Yes, the requester is asking that if a petition for what's known as a writ of certiorari is granted by the Supreme Court in this case, and if I can just tab back, the EFSB, the Energy Facility Siting Board, has basically said to this South Coast firm that if you don't have a power purchase agreement, then we're not going to entertain your application. This is for the cables up to Secana.
This is what they appealed already.
So they're appealing that decision to the Supreme Court. There's no right of appeal. So the procedure is to file what's known as a writ of certiorari. They've done that. I don't anticipate that the Supreme Court will make a decision on whether or not they're going to accept this appeal until sometime in the late winter or the early spring. So the requester is asking that if the Supreme Court grants this petition, then the town get involved and file what's known as a friend of the court petition. I took a look at the writ. I noticed that in the service contacts for the lawyers, Marissa Desatel is listed as the lawyer for the town of Little Compton and the town of Middletown. So I think it's appropriate here to refer this letter out to her so that she can give you some advice on the matter as to what, if anything, the town should do here. It's really her decision from a strategic standpoint.
I'd like to make a motion that our solicitor contact Ms. Dusatel and discuss this with her and come up with a, whatever he sees fit, whatever, for the best interest of the town with Ms. Dusatel, and report back to the council on it.
Tony, do you need to talk to her? Or you just want us to send this letter to her?
Well, I'm going to send it out, but
You need to talk to her, that's,
the question is whether or not she thinks, what she thinks the town should do here. And I'd also be interested to see what the town of Middletown is doing as a kind of a cost saving.
I'll second Gary's motion.
I always think something like this, it's better to have our solicitor protect our interests.
I didn't know if this was just something you need to.
The only question I have there is, have you got an opinion yet on whether you can do that?
I'll have it by the second meeting in September.
Okay. I don't want to put him in a spot.
At this stage for this thing, CRMC is not a party to this case.
Not yet.
This particular, well, they won't be in this case. So I think it's okay for me just to send it out and just ask her what she's doing so that I can give you a report.
The motion then has been made and seconded for the solicitor to have this discussion and assigning of the task to Attorney Desatel. Is there any further discussion?
Only if he wouldn't be assigning the task to ensure that the task is already assigned to her. Isn't that more correct? Because she's already on the list.
Yeah, I think what you just need to know from her is some advice on this particular aspect of the case that she's representing the town on. That's all. So I'm really not going to be doing anything other than getting a report back.
Okay. Right.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The abatement list from the assessor.
I spoke with the assessor on this. On the third one down, it said garden shed overstated, looks pretty, and I said, well, that must be quite a garden shed if it's worth $600,000, and she said that, well, that was for the whole property, not just the shed, so that was the only question I had for them. The rest of them are pretty self-explanatory, so I'm going to make a motion to approve as given to us.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to approve the assessor's abatement list. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The consent file has a single item.
Motion to place the item on file unless someone wants to talk to it.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
And the payment of bills.
Motion to pay the bills.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. There being no further business before the council, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.